So tonight we have the privilege of talking one of my favorite subjects, and that's elk hunting. First of all, we have two wildlife biologists who are going to be talking elk, and then we're going to be moving into the hunting tactics of the webinar. So Josh and Carrington, go ahead and take it away. And thank you so much for your willingness to do this tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Thanks for having us. Welcome, everybody. And we're excited to, chat a little bit about what we do. We're going to burn through these slides pretty quick just to keep things rolling. But, we're passionate about elk biology and management. And I think any one of these subjects, we could talk for quite a while. So we'll burn through, keep those questions going in the chat. And I'm going to introduce myself here. Yeah, my name is Josh Bush. I'm a wildlife biologist with Region 2, CDFW. I cover Colusa, Glen Lake, and Yolo County. I've worked with CDFW since 2005, started as a scientific aide and worked my way up. Job duties include a game manager, and it's not specific to elk, but it includes elk, deer, bear, managing wildlands, and I like to focus on applied research, so getting population numbers, solving problems out there related to movement, elk fecundity, all those things. So I'll start with a bit of an outdated term, but we're all here. We're all in the hunting community. So I'm a hook and bullet biologist. I grew up in the Sac Valley hunting and fishing with my dad. So that inspired me to really follow this as a career. I went to UC Davis, got a degree in wildlife conservation biology with a specialization in wildlife management, and it's led me here. So I've worked in those counties since 2011. I'm directly involved with elk and elk research for 4 hunt units. That's Lake Pillsbury, Cache Creek, East Park Reservoir, and Bear Valley hunt units. And just so everybody knows, I have 18 preference points currently, so I'm a little bit behind. So I am invested in everybody drawing elk tags, so I get my opportunity. So I'll give it off to Carrington now.
My name is Carrington Hilson. I am the elk research biologist for the North Coast, and I cover 3 counties, so Del Norte, Humboldt, and Mendocino, so I'm covering 2 hunt zones. I got my undergraduate in biology from Virginia Tech, so I'm originally from Virginia. I got my master's at Humboldt State. I left for a minute and was the statewide disease biologist for Arizona Game and Fish, and came back up here in 2016. Just really passionate about the research that I'm doing and managing this species and finding that balance between range expansion and kind of solving conflict issues with property owners here on the coast. So next slide. So what Josh and I are covering today is a bit about the general biology of elk, the history of elk in California, distribution of the 3 subspecies, and our current hunting programs. In addition, we'll cover some of the efforts and data collected that the department is using to make the management decisions. So elk are the 2nd largest species in the deer family. Largest being the moose. I've gotten reports of moose actually being up in Del Norte County. I can attest they're pretty big up there. So California is the only state that has 3 subspecies of elk. So we have the Roosevelt, the Rocky Mountain, and Tule. Tule elk are endemic to California, meaning that they only occur here.
This slide is just showing a little bit about North American elk evolution. As Carrington mentioned, we've got 3 subspecies in California. This is a hypothesized route of how they got to where they're at, with Rocky Mountain elk being the predominant species before they differentiated into. You've got obviously the Roosevelts up on the North Coast, Tule elk settling in the Sacramento Valley and the Central Coast Range, and then also an extinct species of elk, the Merriam's elk down in the Southwest. Historic distribution is similar to what we're seeing today, just more wide-reaching. So you've got Rocky Mountain elk in the northeastern portions of the state, Roosevelt in the northwest, and Tule elk, that same graphic there in the Central Valley, Central Coast. This slide's showing a little bit of the changes in elk distribution. So pristine conditions before European contact. There was, elk in that previous slide. Elk distribution changed quite a bit with the gold rush and the influx of gold miners and population coming to California. They really decimated the elk populations due to market hunting and hide hunting, and so for both meat and hide. But what we were left with a couple remnant populations of elk. The state initiated some relocation efforts in early 1900s that left us with Tule elk in both Colusa County and then over here in Owens Valley. Rocky Mountain elk were moved into a couple of different locations. And then what we're looking at today as a 2016 map is kind of our current distribution. So it's patchy. We've got a couple confined herds, and we're seeing range expansion in both number of elk and also territory that they occupy, but it's slow overall. So we'll go into a little bit about each species of elk we have here in California, starting with the Tule elk. As Carrington mentioned, they're endemic to California. They are our smallest subspecies, with bulls, sub 500 pounds in a lot of occasions, cows around 325. So they're the lightest in color. They're adapted to dry, open habitats, dry conditions. I've heard them referred to as a lazy elk. That's because they're not migrating. They don't move a ton if the resources they have are abundant. So there is hybridization with elk species. So they have and do hybridize with Roosevelt elk. Now I talked a bit about the size, but when conditions are right and conditions are prime, as the name implies, Tule elk, Grizzly Island is a location. We have a good number of elk, and those elk will get up to the bulls rival Rocky Mountain in size with 800 pounds. So now this is a hunting focused clinic. So they are known for a number of crown points. They're only found in California. So those wishing to complete one of their various elk slams or North American slams, this is a priority and a tough one to get. I mentioned a little bit about historic range. This is just a figure talking about Tule elk through history. So historically, there was 500,000 in the Central Valley. Habitat loss, market hunting caused declines to 2 to 3 individuals or one breeding pair. Henry Miller in the lower San Joaquin Valley was credited as saving them from extinction. He was a large landowner at the time. He kept these elk in a pen, protected them from any hunting, and then they ate him out of house and home, and we tried to unsuccessfully and then successfully relocate elk. So in 1922, we had the successful introduction up here in Colusa County in the Cache Creek area, and that Cache Creek herd remains today. It is currently the oldest free-ranging Tule elk herd in the state. So you can hunt those elk in there, the oldest free-ranging herd with a Bear Valley or a Cache Creek tag. This just showing historic range in dark brown and in light brown, the current range.
So Roosevelt elk, they are distinguishable from the other subspecies by their darker coats. They are also the largest of the subspecies, with cows weighing in around 600 pounds and bulls around 900 pounds. Similar to the Tule elk, the populations declined significantly in the 1800s. Some accounts believe that the populations got down to only 100 to 200 individuals. Since then, the populations have grown substantially due to natural immigration and from populations in Oregon and conservation efforts. So translocation efforts from remnant herds in California really helped to establish the populations we have now. We had several releases up in Del Norte County. Those were deemed unsuccessful. So the elk we have there now actually came down from Oregon. Then we moved some elk from Prairie Creek down into the Kings Range. Folks in Whitethorn can attest that those populations are doing quite well. And then we also moved over 250 elk into Siskiyou and Trinity counties, and they're also doing quite well. So as of 2018, we had approximately 5,700 Roosevelt elk in California, and about half that number actually exists on the North Coast in Del Norte and Humboldt.
Touching a little on Rocky Mountain, or moving to Rocky Mountain, they're the largest, they have the largest antlers of the subspecies, with cows approaching 600 pounds and bulls getting up to 900. They can do hybridize with, or can hybridize with Roosevelt elk. There is a bit of their native status in California disputed. We don't know if they remained here after, elk were kind of moved off from the state. And we have translocated populations from both Montana and Nebraska to California in the early 1900s. So as of 2023, we got approximately 1,900 elk. So we started from a small population and it keeps expanding in both number and range. So current range, and what we're seeing is a movement south from that range into the Sierra Valley, as far and Sierra and Plumas counties, as far south as Prosser Reservoir, north of Truckee. We've had reports. Recently in 2019 and 20, we had a bull move into the Icehouse Reservoir area in El Dorado County. And he was also spotted further south, the same bull at Sonora Pass. So they are moving around, and we do get sporadic reports, and we're trying to follow up on those. We knew about that elk was the same one from both camera and fecal DNA identification. Going into the natural history of elk, so we've got 3 or 4 main periods of interest. So we've got our calving of May through June, weaned at 2 months. See, we got bulls rutting in early fall, anywhere from July 15th to October 15th. It's a big rut with peak in mid-August to mid-September. During the winter period, bulls are more isolated and away from the cow-calf herds. Cow-calf herds don't move too much, and they're fairly long-lived animals, with Roosevelt's being harvested age of 19 for Rocky Mountain, and the oldest Thule we've harvested in the state is 18. So calves are approaching around 35 pounds for all species. And this is some collar work done in the Lake Pillsbury Basin on those elk up there. And this is just showing kind of their tendencies seasonally. So these are all cow elk, 5 individuals. They don't move much seasonally, but you'll see a difference here with bull elk. In the rut, they're very concentrated where those cows are. Post-rut, they're moving around even more, and the most dispersed they've been is pre-rut, when they're forming those bachelor groups, and before they move into in for the full-blown rut there.
Okay, on to a bit about management from the department. So in 2018, the department finalized the elk management plan. This document has information regarding the history of elk in California, habitat and factors affecting their populations, and finally, management goals and actions. So this document also describes the 22 elk management units. For each of these, there's specific population objectives and future management actions listed. This is an amazing resource to learn about the history of the EMUs and the location of elk within these EMUs, since most of the EMUs actually align with the elk hunt zones. So this is the map, a map of the 22 elk management units. Elk do not occur continuously within these EMUs, but rather herds tend to be a little more there's patchy distribution. Some elk occur outside the boundaries of these units, and there are several confined herds that you can see here in the orange. What color is that? That's green dots on the map. Some of the elk hunts cover multiple EMUs, which is why there are less EMUs than we have hunt zones. So in order to work on the management goals outlined for each EMU, a certain amount of data needs to be collected. So the ultimate goal is the conservation of wildlife populations, and the best way to do that is through a science-based management decisions. We're incorporating an adaptive management approach, which means that we are implementing and monitoring, we implement and monitor the populations, we gather data, we analyze that data, and then we adapt or improve the methods based upon what we've learned. There's a lot of information that we gather, but one of the most important is population size. By monitoring these populations, we're able to make management decisions and understand the factors influence population growth or decline and trends over time. In order to get all this data, there's kind of two main things that we have to do. One is to survey or count these populations, and the other is normally gathered through the use of collar data from individuals. So aerial surveys are kind of the main method by which we get information on the number of elk. There's a couple other methods such as fixed wing, drone, and FLIR, but normally we utilize helicopters. So there's a lot of information that we can glean from this, such as sex ratios, calf recoupment, and then of course we can utilize models to estimate abundance. So aerial surveys, there's kind of one caveat here. They require that you can see the elk from the air. And there's much of Northern California, even outside of the coast, that the steep terrain and dense vegetation hinders this type of survey method.
We began employing fecal DNA monitoring as an alternative to flying. It's cheaper than flying, but it does have some drawbacks. It's labor and time intensive. Private property access can be really problematic. It has great results, and they're very similar to aerial methods. And it has an added benefit of getting genetic information. That genetic information can show elk interactions and herd assemblages, as well as a baseline for Thule elk genetic diversity. As I mentioned, they went through a severe population bottleneck with just 2 to 3 individuals, one breeding pair. And that genetic baseline can inform if inbreeding or herd separation is causing herd-wide and systemic problems with that population. So we're using that information to estimate elk populations. Now, this is an outdated slide from our actual website counts. It's from 2017. So what it's showing, and what I'm trying to illustrate, is that elk populations are increasing, and we're monitoring those increases. So one thing it's not showing is Rocky Mountain elk have not shown to have an incline. That's due to their sporadic nature and lack of surveys over the past few years. But recent surveys have showed there's almost 2,000 Rocky Mountain elk, and that's a minimum count instead of an estimated population. And Thule's currently sit at over 5,300 animals. So the bottom line from this is a little outdated, but elk populations are growing and moving around the state.
So the way that we put collars out is clearly we have to get these animals in hand. Several ways in which we do that. So there's helicopter net gunning, which I believe, yeah, we're watching that video right now. Corral trapping and free range darting. So the helicopter net gunning, we basically have some folks up in the ship who utilize a net launcher, and basically there we go, trap the elk. And then we have folks jump down and basically tackle that guy. There we go. And then we also, so the corral traps, basically you bait these guys in, which you'll see in the next video. And once those elk are within the corral trap, we do dart them or immobilize them. So what you're going to see here is the elk going down from immobilization drugs. You can actually see the dart in the left hindquarters of this guy. And this is what I spend almost 6 months of my time doing, is actually free range darting elk. So I'm not a hunter, but I do go out and have to get 55 yards from these elk in order to dart them. And normally I'm deploying about 20 to 25 collars on an annual basis. So what we're getting from this the purpose of these captures, right, is to get these collars out and mark these individuals. We end up getting spatial use. We can determine migration pathways. We get survival, either from our cow or bull survival. We can understand causes of mortality. And then at the end of all of this, we can analyze a home range or see the area that these animals occupy.
One more reason for capture is to induce gene flow, especially and it's important in Tule elk. Again, we're mentioning the genetic bottleneck from the past, as well as the patchy distribution of elk. So what we're trying to do is keep that herd genetics up and artificially move elk around to do that. So we have a couple captive elk herds. When those elk in San Luis National Wildlife Refuge and the Tutman Tule Elk State Reserve, if those Tule elk, when those Tule elk periodically go above the carrying capacity of their enclosures, those elk are moved throughout the state. We do that to augment movement between herds to increase gene flow and for good genetic diversity herd-wide. As Carrington mentioned, mortality is a reason we put out collars. So we're attempting to determine cause-specific mortality. This graph breaks down a few of the reasons, specific reasons the Calusa and Tule elk died, or the monitored elk died. The big three come down to predation, humans, both hunting and poaching, and vehicles. There's lots of different reasons. A lot of time they're unknown, and that happens when we can't get to an elk fast enough to determine an absolute cause. So hunter harvest is a big one, as well as mountain lions for this particular herd. But say humans and predation are the big two, with vehicles being close by and associated with humans. So here's just a picture of a killed elk from that Calusa, the Cache Creek herd, cached by a mountain lion. So you see the collar there, and this is a fresh one.
So Josh mentioned that we're looking at disease. We ended up first time testing positive for treponine-associated hoof disease from hunter harvest elk in 2019. So this disease was first identified up in Washington, and since we found it down in Oregon and over in Idaho. The hooves of these elk eventually get to the point where they slough completely off. So these pictures are pretty gruesome. And it's debilitating. These elk never recover. So they eventually will kind of lay down and starve to death. So we are monitoring for this disease pretty extensively, and we have gotten amazing support from our hunters up here on the coast and statewide. So we ask that anybody that hunts an elk, if they would take a look at the feet and anything that's abnormal, report it to the department. On the North Coast specifically, we are actually collecting every single hoof, so all 4 hooves from every hunter harvested individual. And we're tracking this disease and attempting to decrease densities as well as go out and lethally remove these elk, so that way we hopefully one day will have healthier populations up here. So next slide. So I mentioned the hunters are, amazing at collecting samples for disease surveillance, but they're also really assisting in some of the management actions that are helping to make these populations healthier. So in order to decrease, hopefully, the prevalence of this disease, we're decreasing the densities of these populations. So elk on the coast actually are really highly habituated and highly dense populations. So our hunters are our best effort, our best management tool right now. So the tags and application fees actually support management and conservation of elk and their habitat statewide. And there's several different opportunities for hunting elk statewide. Those are through the general hunt, the PLM program, the share program, and through landowner tags, also known as the cooperative elk hunt.
To get to where we're going with elk hunting, it's nice to know where we started. So like we've mentioned several times, elk populations were historically low, and they're on the rebound and the rise. So in 1854, elk hunting was closed in the balance of the state. And since then, we've worked to build elk populations where we can sustainably hunt them. This is actually pretty recent where we've started implementing annual hunts. So Tule elk is annual in 1989, after a few Senate bills that deemed the population had to hit 2,000 before hunting. So it did so in 1987, and we followed shortly after with hunting. Rockies, we started hunting annually in 1987. With some hunts in the late 60s, but really got going later. And Roosevelt's different hunt start dates in different areas of that part of the state, but annually we started in 1986, so relatively recent timeline for hunting in California. These zones are similar to the elk management units, but there's a few more. I'd like to highlight 3 that are new for 2003, new last year, and that's the Central Coast, Gavilan, and Tehachapi over here. So these are good. This is a great reference if you're looking at location-specific hunts when you're ready to apply. The share program is a good way to grab an elk tag. That's the Shared Habitat Alliance for Recreational Enhancement. We love an acronym. So these are access permits on private property issued by random draw. Overall, there was 95 tags issued in 2023 with 72 elk harvested. So with all elk programs, we like to keep a high level of hunter success, just because these could be once in a lifetime hunts. So share elk hunts last year were $13.78 application fee per hunt choice. So you can apply for any and all of those 95 tags if you wish. They're both for cow and bull hunts and property specific. So these are aimed at increasing opportunity to compensate landowners for damage caused by elk. And it covers private landowner liability and allows the public out there with a chance to get a nice elk.
So I wanted to add one thing about the share program. We just had a round of regulation change, and we actually have some increases in share allotments. So over the next couple of years, we should see increased tags in some of our conflict areas, which include the North Coast, Mendocino, and Tehachapi. So the other thing that we have, hunt opportunity, is for private property owners. Also known as the cooperative elk hunt. So for the majority of the state, it equates to 20% of the public allotment, so the share plus the general tags. The property has to be 640 contiguous acres and within an elk hunt zone. So as I mentioned, we had some regulation changes that identified several of our hunt zones as conflict areas. And what we have now is that the private property owners only need to have 60 contiguous acres in order to qualify. The number of bull tags has remained unchanged to not exceed that 20%. But we have the capacity to issue a 1-to-1 ratio, or the equal number of public tags, which would include our share and general tags just for cows.
Now to the big one, the general application. So California manages the general tags through a modified preference point system. It's an annual application with preference points given to unsuccessful applicants every year. So these preference points build as long as you continually apply with no breaks over 5 years long. So what we call max points is currently at 22 points. So max points means you're giving one of the preference point, or a chance at drawing the preference point tag. So it's a modified system, meaning if there's one tag, it's a random draw. If 2 tags, 1 is random and 1 goes to the preference point applicant. If over 2, 75% of the tags go to a preference point, to preference point holders, and then the remaining 25 go at random. It's a conservative harvest. We issue these tags for bull, antlerless, and spike hunts and have different period hunts. The reason we do this is to be mindful of public opportunities and conflicts in those opportunities to prevent overharvest and overuse of public land shifting elk to private, which we don't want. Again, we try to manage these as a high success hunt. So random is your best bet for drawing if you are not at max points. So that's something you want to look at on your big game hunting digest when you put in. And you want to pick a zone and timing and location and something that works for you. So currently there are 0 bull hunts that are not available, that are not drawing at max points. As of, I believe, last year, some antlerless hunts are now drawing with less than max. So if you're looking to just harvest any elk, put some meat in the freezer, and you don't have max points or you're close to max points, antlerless hunts might be the way to go. There's currently 358 tags issued as of last year. So I hope that number continues to climb. Oh, and that's just a nice bull I wanted to throw a picture of. And you are hunters, and harvest data is important to us. You are one of the best tools we have as elk managers. So we utilize your information heavily. So fill out your harvest reports online. Take those teeth, put them in. It's fun for you guys to see, but it also allows us to age these animals using tooth ring data and set a proper harvest regime. So we want all that data in from you guys. So be mindful. Utilize myself and Carrington or anybody, any biologist as a resource to help you be successful. So we want to know the date, locality of kill, and also how long it took you to harvest your elk. These help us in managing these elk into the future and for the next generation. So this is a list of collaborators. There's too many to put on one slide. So not everybody's represented, but all of these entities help in some way with elk research, elk management, conservation, or habitat protection and enhancement. So we couldn't do what we do as a state agency managing these elk without our, the help of partners. So we want to give them a little shout out, and a special shout out to the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. Us all being hunters and interested in conservation, we might think of, well, that previous list was a lot of agencies and tribes. How do I fit in? Well, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation is a good way you can fit in and can contribute. It's probably the best way for hunters to contribute to elk conservation and management. There's work days, fundraising dinners. Your money directly contributes to conservation easements and to keep landscapes working and allow elk to flourish. So there's direct public benefits. One here is a conservation easement of 2,400 acres in Colusa County that Rocky Mountain Elk helped protect, manage, and enhance for future public benefit in elk. So check them out via their website or reach out to us if you have any questions. Our contact information right below. So thank you for your time. Eric, I'll leave it to you. I don't know if we have time for questions or we just go straight to the Q&A or chat.
Yeah, thanks so much, Josh and Carrington, for your willingness to do this tonight. I'm so thankful to have with me some experienced elk hunters. Stoked that you're with me. Let me go ahead and introduce you guys tonight. So we have Paul Vandiver. Paul is a hunter education instructor. He's a law enforcement officer. You could see him on screen. He's still on uniform. He's serving the public right now, and he's serving the public by doing this webinar. Paul has 30 plus years of elk hunting experience. Thank you so much, Paul, for being with us. And then we also have with us Don Martin. Don is the Wild Sheep Foundation Outstanding Guide Award winner of the year. I think that was in 2018, 2019, somewhere in that ballpark. He's also the California president of the Wild Sheep Foundation. Thanks so much for your work, with the Sheep Foundation, Don. What I love about these two is they absolutely team up to help others. And what I mean by that is they are actively mentoring other new hunters in the process. Don and Paul, can you talk to us a little bit about that? I think that's one of your favorite parts about elk hunting.
Paul, go ahead.
Hey, just to start off, yeah, it's one of my favorite things to do. Again, I've taught with the advanced hunter safety and hunter safety, and part of my favorite thing to do is, although I love hunting with myself, probably nothing makes me feel better than helping friends, family, and folks that are just getting into the hunting community out there on hunts, and especially hunting one of my favorite critters, elk. Just love it to death.
Absolutely. And then Don, you were mentioning earlier in an email that you're actively hunting other species with kids. You're hunting turkeys earlier in the year. Tell us a little bit about the importance of mentorship.
Well, and the role that we play as we mature as hunters and conservationists is that we lead the next generation in the right direction. And and in this case, when we're talking about elk hunting, this is a huge step for a lot of people, especially in the great state of California, where we're blessed to have all three species of elk in the same state. Um, it's each and every one of us. It's our responsibility to make sure that we take care of what we have and that we introduce the next generation to these traditions and teach them right and carry on that tradition because I can tell you there's nothing more rewarding than standing right next to someone watching them kill their first elk. It is the greatest thing that I do as a guide outfitter, I can promise you.
Absolutely. So this next picture kind of shows that. I know it's a pretty subjective question to ask, but what are your favorite parts of elk hunting? What draws you to the elk hunting woods?
Go ahead, Paul. I'll let you lead on all these, okay?
Basically, when you're elk hunting, you get to hunt some of the most diverse country and terrain you can think of. Elk in all parts of the Western United States can, inhabit things from the desert floor to the highest tips of the Rockies. In California, you can find them in our central locations in California, all the way up to the thickets in the Roosevelt country in Northern California to the what I call the Badlands, like Modoc County, where we have our Rocky Mountain elk all the way into Lassen. So just those abilities to be in that specialized country, hunting these critters and testing yourself every year is just some of the things I most admire. It's just a real chance to test yourself, test your hunting skills, and get out with friends and families from extremely diverse country.
Yeah, and I'll parrot that. There, these elk. Let's keep in mind all the way from Alaska through all the Rocky Mountain states. The one of the greatest things about hunting elk is to go where elk live and experience this diverse habitat from the rainforests of the Pacific Northwest, British Columbia, and Alaska, all the way down to the desert country, all the way to Texas. It gives you this broad experience range where you can engage the symbol of the American West, and people need to think about for all those people traveling west during the westward expansion that had never seen an elk before. The elk truly is a symbol of the American West, and it's a tremendous experience. It's a great opportunity to get out there with friends and family, fill your freezer, and there's nothing more iconic than an elk. And when we're talking about California, I'll go to the next level, and I'll be so bold as to say there's nothing more iconic than the Thule elk because it has such a tremendous history, and the Thule elk is probably the greatest conservation story that most people have never heard of because we literally brought a species back from the edge of extinction and we're hunting them today, and we should all be very, very thankful.
Amen. That's well stated. And Don, if you don't mind turning your camera on, that would be helpful.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. So I asked both of these guys to talk about a memorable hunt. And so why don't you guys go ahead and share not only what your memorable hunt was, but what made these hunts so special?
So if you can see in that hunt right there, that is myself, and you can see some family members in there. What you can't see is my 7-year-old daughter took that family photo. So one of the most important things about this hunt, it was a Nevada high desert elk hunt with my friend who's pictured in there. His name's Jeff Remington. Jeff Remington was recently diagnosed with a deadly form of melanoma skin cancer. He's been fighting that for the last couple of years. This was a hunt that took place in 2016, and my entire family was there, able to be spending time with him. We hunted this particular bull that we nicknamed Girth Brooks from the mass that he carried on. As you guys can see, just a big old Nevada bull. We're finally able to anchor that bull on the 5th day of that hunt, and we were all able to share that memory out there in the Nevada high desert. Some of you might not know I'm from Nevada originally, born and raised. So Nevada has a special spot in my heart. I still love to get out there and hunt all the time. I love being out there in that country. There's just something special about the smell of wet sage. And it's just having everybody together like that, taking all those memories into play, and having to hunt one of my favorite species, elk, and be there with one of my buddies and my entire family just meant the world to me. And you never know how many opening mornings that you'll have or how many hunts you have left. So take every opportunity to get out there and hunt while you can.
Outstanding. How about you, Don?
Oh man, I don't know if I can live up to Paul there. All I can tell you is that's a younger version of me there on the left, and all I can say, it's the smallest elk I've ever killed, but it was over the counter tag, public land, wilderness, backpack hunt. Bull died in a hole. You know, and it was we were so far from the trailhead, and it was probably the most miserable elk hunt, but it was the elk hunt that fulfilled my Grand Slam of North American elk. That was the last one I needed. I was lucky enough to kill a Rocky in Western Oregon, drew a California Tule elk tag, killed a bull down in the La Panza, and that was the bull I needed to put the cherry on top of the ice cream. All I can tell you is wonderful experience. Shared it with one of my best friends, and it sucked the whole time. And that's part of the experience, is that there's a price that has to come, and when you fulfill your obligation as a hunter and a conservationist, and you butcher these animals out and you carry them back, it gives true value to the experience and the animal. And I look at this set of horns in my house every day, not my biggest elk, and it doesn't matter. It was the experience. It checked a box. It fulfilled a dream, and it was more than a Madera farm boy is entitled to, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely love it. And to your point, it's not the size of the antlers necessarily that makes for a memorable hunt. And that's not so the trophy eye of the beholder, and that's not the biggest rosy, but on the other hand, some of my most memorable hunts have been even cow hunts where you're able to spend time with family, and for one reason or another, that's what makes for a memorable hunt. So well said, Don. So you drew an elk tag. Now what? So give me some tips on, or maybe your ideas on guided versus do it yourself. And let's talk a little bit about expectations, about what is considered maybe a trophy, and then maybe physical and mental conditioning. Go ahead and start us out, Paul.
Hey, just on the start of that, now that you've got this tag, first thing I want you to do is become a sponge. You should just soak up as much information as you possibly can. We have the world at our fingertips with the online research. We have so many good tools like Go Hunt, Onyx maps, Google Maps. You can look up about anything you want, U.S. Forest Service maps, everything's online and available. So I suggest that you immediately go online and start, making yourself an expert online on what you can do. If I can change out my bathroom sink on YouTube, I'm sure I can find videos on how to find elk out there too. So lots of good ways to do that. I need to think about the proper equipment that you're going to be hunting with, whether it's going to be bows or rifles. Make sure that you become an expert on those and what you're going to do. Become a proficient shooter in those, because proficient shooting is going to make you or break you in these type of deals. And I'm sure Don's going to go into this as well. He's well versed on this, but the mental and physical conditioning that you need to go into these hunts with, physical shape, legs and lungs kill elk. They may not help you pack those elk off the mountains, but they're going to get you to that spot. So being able to walk and get into these tough places, you got to be in good physical shape, and you have to have a lot of mental toughness. Whether you're going to need four-wheel drive vehicles, camping gear, and that kind of stuff, just to have some basic logistics on what you want to do. And then you got to decide whether or not if you want to go as with it. And I'll let Don go more into the guided end of it. But if you want to go on a guided hunt, make sure you do some research on what kind of hunting you like to do, whether it be horseback, quads, side-by-sides, four-wheel drives, different type of terrain you may be hunting with, or if you want to do it yourself, which is going to require a whole lot more work. And I'll kind of let Don expand on that end of it.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. So, this is a great question. We always get this guided or do it yourself. This gonna you kind of have to be honest with yourself about your physical abilities, your experience level. You have to ask yourself these honest questions. But at the end of the day, on the guided side, what I try to tell people is, and it doesn't matter what you're hunting or who the guide is or what you're chasing, regardless of species, you have to connect with the person. That is going to be your new best friend for 7 to 14 to 21 days, depending on the expedition. So go with your gut in that matter. I mean, there's a whole host of questions that you can ask. What I'm suggesting is you have to go with the person that gives you the most confidence on the guide side. In terms of do it yourself, the challenges that you're going to face ultimately as a guide outfitter, I'm going to tell you right now, the most important thing is being able to deal with the animal once it hits the ground. That's the most valuable skill and that I provide to my clients is gutless method, rib roll, teach them the skills, give them the confidence to kill and process an animal where it falls. There's a whole host of YouTube videos on those subjects. We're going to provide some of those links, I believe. So but you need to be honest with yourself because an elk is a big animal. All right. And then in terms of trophy expectations is you need to lower your expectations, especially if it's your first elk. The goal should be, I just want to kill an elk. Why? You need the experience. It's that simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to kill a world record. You don't have to kill a booner or Pope and Young animal. The most important thing is you're in the field, you're having that experience, you're gaining experience, and all of that is going to build to your next hunt. Always be looking to your next hunt. And with those words said, always be looking to your next hunt. Unfortunately, there's no off season. Physical conditioning, cardio, 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 and when in doubt, more cardio. I'm going to tell you right now, I have never been a strong person. I cannot put on weight. I just can't do it. But I have done some great things over the course of my career, and it boils down to what's between your ears, your mental mindset. Physical conditioning is a necessary step forward to maintaining your mental condition. So cardio, cardio, cardio. And if you're going to kill an elk and pack an elk out, core strength, core strength, core strength, plank, plank, plank. It's that simple. Legs, 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 plank, plank, plank. And then on the mental side, what I would suggest is run a half marathon. run a marathon. Commit to that schedule. It's not that complicated. halhigdon.com. Go there, do the couch to 5K, do the couch to 10K. There is a discipline that will come with running an event, training for the event, the daily runs. You have a schedule. You can check them off on your fridge and you can work towards a goal. The half marathon is probably the best. Okay. Don't overreach. Don't be a victim of your own enthusiasm. Cardio, 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 core strength, backpack training. Even if you're an older, let's say you're my age and you've been, maybe you're not, haven't been that doing a bunch that you need to be doing. Take your dog for a walk, put your backpack on, put 20 pounds in the backpack. 3 weeks later, put 40 pounds in the backpack. 3 weeks later, put 60 pounds in the backpack. You need to be prepared to carry out an Elk-Hunting quarter. You need to wrap your mind around that. Okay. So take these steps necessary so that you can be the tool towards your own success.
Outstanding. So let's talk a little bit about elk hunting gear, and we could get into the weeds. We could probably do a whole webinar on this, but let's just kind of narrow it down a little bit. So what are you guys bringing for elk hunting that maybe you would not be bringing for, like, say, a backpack deer hunt or another big game hunt? Start us off, Paul.
Just some of the things that I would take, especially if I'm hunting on the Western style, which is my main style of hunting elk. You're going to need a really good spotting scope. I think glass is super important. I invest in high quality binoculars and spotting scopes. Let your optics do the walking for you. Saves lots of time. If you're out in that kind of country too, like we said, there's going to be a good physical condition, but there's a lot of dirt roads and stuff. You need to have a good 4x4, maybe a good side-by-side. Quads, those are always important. Horses, if you're going into trail style hunting as well. We always carry a little more gear because an elk, of course, is going to be a little tougher to butcher up. And as John stated, it's a much greater task to break down an elk than it is to a deer. Therefore, I'm going to need a lot more cooler space. So I always tell people, if you think you have enough coolers, bring one extra full of ice, because you don't. An elk breakdown is going to be a big process. And saying that, just like Don stated, I tell all my hunters or people that I'm hunting with it, be prepared to carry out 4 full loads of meat at over 70 pounds a pack. And that does not include the head, the antlers, and the cape. So that could be 5 to 6 loads total. So your backpack has to be big enough and strong enough to carry out 70 pounds, as do you. So make sure you have a good packing system. I'm a huge fan of Kuiu. Those are the backpacks I use. They have a good strapping system, a good meat shelf built into those backpacks, which is great for carrying out those hind quarters, front quarters, and all of the other loose meats and gear that go along with that. So also a good knife system. I like a knife system. I can do most of my work with a 4-inch scalpel style knife. A lot of hunters out there probably are well versed with Avalon or Gerber system, which is very close to that with an interchangeable blade on it. But I also like a fixed blade too, and then 4 to 6 inch style. There's a few nice ones out there. Avalon makes a nice one that has a switch style blade that has a 4 to 6 inch blade, but it also has the Avalon interchangeable blade built into that. A good knife is going to help you break. And like I said, you just need a good hunting gear too. Clothes that are going to keep you warm out there and dry. Something in a camouflage pattern. Here in California, we don't have to wear orange, so just wearing good camouflage out there. We're out there in good, comfortable clothing. And if you're doing a lot of hiking, consider some good footwear. I'm not going to list any brands, but you guys can do your research out there. But good quality footwear will make for a much more enjoyable hunt. With that, I'll leave it to Don. I know he's got some good expertise that I'd love to hear him talk about as well.
Well, leading off from Paul's comments, I'm going to tell you right now, boots and rain gear, boots and rain gear, boots and rain gear. I can't say it enough times. Those are the 2 most magical components of your whole experience. So that's something that you really need to take into account. One, be aware the most dangerous thing you're going to run into out there is other people have a means by which to defend yourself. If you're carrying a rifle, you're good. If you're going on a bow hunt, check the state regs for the state that you're in to see if you can carry a handgun. And you got to have one of these magical devices. If you don't have cell service, you have to be able to call for help. Especially so many of us, especially the young guys, they're super competitive, they're highly motivated, they hunt by themselves. And if you're one of these guys and you're out there by yourself, you need to have this thing clipped on you all the time. If you're hunting in Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, grizzly country, you need to have this thing on your person all the time. And I don't care. I'm not sponsored by any of these guys. You need to have a device similar to this so that you can call for help. Those two things right there, those are so wildly important, especially if you're going to backpack hunt, you're going to be off grid. There's a whole host of ways I can go here, but those are the most important. I can guarantee you, I had a mountain lion try to eat me in Nevada. You have to be able to defend yourself, and you have to be able to call for help. And I'm going to say quality game bags, and never overlook paracord. Paracord could be the most valuable thing you throw in your pack. More paracord, and an extra headlamp. Always take 2 headlamps. I'm just saying.
Outstanding. So let's talk a little bit about shooting proficiency. So why is shooting proficiency is important for anything you're hunting, but why is it especially important for elk?
Just a little background, and I don't know how versed everybody in the crowd is, but elk are big, strong critters. And just in the years that I've been hunting, I've seen so many elk that you think you've hit and it's going to die right there or die within a few yards, find it miles down the road. I've had archery hunters in the past that I was guiding who have made just perfect shots on elk that I've tracked for 2 days to finally find them. So I go into telling people I don't stop shooting elk until that elk is on the ground and it's not moving. So if you do get a chance, an opportunity to shoot an elk, I always tell them to keep shooting it until that thing is completely on the ground and stop moving. I've chased too many elk to want to have to do that any further. So make good quality, clean shots. I always say and I'm just going to talk about rifles first. When we're using a rifle on an elk hunt, I don't have any problems with the smaller calibers. However, I like to use the bigger bore cartridges with maybe like a 30 caliber. And I always say, shoot the rifle that you shoot well. So shoot as big a rifle that you can shoot accurately. I like 300 Win Mags. I like 308s. I like 30-06s. I think those shoot very well. And if you're well versed on those, if you're a smaller person, think about maybe getting a muzzle brake, something on there to take some of the kick out. Make sure you wear hearing protection with that. But shoot the largest caliber that you can shoot well at those elk, and be proficient with it. Make those high quality shots. I think that on a good elk hunt, 400 yards and in would be considered a good elk hunting distance. So be proficient out to those distances. The more comfortable you feel when you're out there in the field, the more accurate your shots are going to be when you take those. And I've been a police officer, and I'm also a police sniper. I always say dry fire. If you have the opportunity to dry fire, take a couple dry fire shots before you take a shot on that animal. If we're talking about archery equipment, I've guided archery for a long time too as well. Just choose the equipment. I'm not going to go into discussions on which bow is better or whatnot. Just make sure you have proper poundage. Make sure you're shooting a nice heavy arrow. I've seen a lot of elk kill with fixed blade broadheads as well as expandable broadheads, so I'm not going to go into that discussion as well. But I do say always shoot a very heavy arrow with a nice sharp broadhead, and put that right into the lungs of those elk, and that will usually secure those things on the ground. But again, like I said, if that elk's up with a rifle, make sure and shoot it again, and I'll turn it over to Don.
Hey, Don, I just wanted to kind of follow up with that. Just can you talk a little bit about when not to take a shot? So when a shot isn't perfect, when it's perhaps not a broadside shot, when is there wisdom in just like, this may not be absolutely perfect, so I'm going to hold off?
It is so important when you're dealing with animals of this size is to be honest with yourself about the shot opportunity. And I try to tell my clients, don't force it. Just be patient. The shot's going to present itself or it's not, but we're not going to wound and lose an animal. At the end of the day, that has to be the goal, is we're looking for that clean kill. And if it's quartering to or quartering away, if you're uncomfortable, just take a deep breath, get out of the scope, let down, whatever you need to do, but don't shoot that bullet. Don't fling that arrow. Don't live with a lifetime of regret, leaving a beautiful elk on the side of the mountain somewhere that you never found. I'm telling you, Paul just hammered down. That was just such a great message and great information. And I don't want to try to expound on that. He just nailed everything that I was going to say, right down to 300 Winchester, which is my go-to caliber. But I'll just say, you have to have discipline. The bigger the animal gets, the more resilient they are, and the farther they're going to go after they get hit. You need to have discipline and understand that when the moment is right, whether you're into the scope or you're at full draw and you're about to cut it loose, have the discipline to take a breath and say, that's not right. Because when you commit 100%, there's no going back. So that needs to be considered every time you fling an arrow, every time you pull the trigger, especially on regal, beautiful animals that exemplify the American West, like the elk.
Absolutely. Great message, guys. So let's talk briefly about scouting tips. So tell us how you're actually scouting, maybe your process. Just go briefly into maybe one or two different ways that you scout elk, Paul.
Put a smile on my face, Eric. Scouting is one of my favorite things to do. So I like to start off with a little internet scouting. I start tinkling around on the internet, start looking at maybe past forums about which unit I drew, what state I'm hunting in, kind of looking at the terrain. The next thing I'll do is I'll go into Onyx Maps and Google Maps, and I'll start to lay out certain canyons and drainages and areas that I know elk will inhabit. I also have to look at what tag did I draw. Folks, there's so much information here. I could talk about this for days. I'm going to kind of break it down in just a couple scenarios. So we have the pre-rut situation, which is before the elk go into their breeding season. We have the rut situation when elk are actually breeding, bulls are breeding cows. And then what I like to have is the post-rut situation. Elk react differently during all of those situations. So I'll take into account what time of season it is. Let's use pre-rut for just an instance here. The bulls are going to be off by themselves, getting ready to rut cows. So I'm going to look in for little areas where I know there's going to be magnificent feed, because these bulls are going to be trying to fatten up before they go into the rut. They're going to want a little bit of sanctuary so they can kind of be away from everything else, but they also need to have some water. So I'll be looking for those areas that those bulls like. And I know that they like less than a 30% grade to bed on. So I'm gonna look for some good bedding areas that I could go into there. If I'm looking into the breeding area when these bulls are starting to rut the cows, I'm going to look for magnificent food, because that's where I know these cows are going to be down there. And I want water so these bulls have places to wallow. So I'm going to be looking for water holes. I'm going to be looking for good food, good bedding area. And then when I go into the post rut or the time after the rut, those bulls then break off and they go on their own again. But this time they just aren't hanging out in places with good food. They're going into what I like to call sanctuaries. They're going into little honey holes, little teeny places that are so deep and so far away and so craggly that no one wants to go into them. So I'll look for places that are tucked in those little kind of spots. And then I'm going to let Dawn kind of go into what to look for on the ground level, from when your feet are actually on the ground and when you're just getting to your hunting spot.
So I'm a big advocate for e-scouting. These are techniques that I've used in the past for myself, in terms of doing a lot of work on the computer before you even leave the house. If you've got a magical device like this, pre-program your device with all these, all these coordinates for water holes and crossings and saddles, all of these natural features that are going to funnel elk into a choke point where you can get close to them. And now we have all these apps you can just get on the phone, which is crazy. It's just how technology's come so far in the last 10 years on the e-scouting side. When you're actually boots on the ground, all you're really trying to do is, I just need to validate what I think I know. But you also need to recognize something that is right now that is happening. You know, hot track. You come into an area and all the trees are demolished by raking bulls. You got a high cow density and it's peak of the rut. You know the bulls are there. You may not see them, but you know the bulls are there. Or you're into the later season, recovery period. You know the bulls are going to be heavy on the feed. So you're going to be focusing on looking for those bulls going from bedding areas to feeding areas. And so all of those components have to come together, and you have to think about all of those all of those factors when you're thinking about making your own chess move, because that's what it is. You're committing to a plan and you're moving your pieces across the chessboard so that you can be successful, because I guarantee you the elk that's sitting across from you on the chessboard is better at it than you, because everything's been trying to kill him his whole life and he's still here, especially if you want to kill a big one. So that there are a lot of moving parts and components to it, but we live in this weird, strange fantasy clown world where you have all this information and opportunity available to you, and you need just to exploit it once you get the tag in your hand. And the opportunity is there, and you need to capitalize on the opportunity.
Absolutely. So I guess that rolls into just kind of getting into the nitty-gritty of hunting tactics. And I know this is going to vary so much on what type of what tag you drew, whether it's, as Paul was talking about, whether it's pre-rut or in the heart of the rut or even post-rut. So talk to us a little bit about different hunting tactics, maybe one or two strategies you guys have used in the past.
So as I said, you can do all the online scouting you want, but nothing beats boots on the ground when you get there. And what I didn't reiterate is when I get to my hunting area, I like to be there 2 to 3 days before that season actually starts. I'll be able to kind of look at the terrain that I've looked at on these maps, check things out, and get a real view of what I've been looking at online. I want to see it for myself. I want to know the road status. I want to know all the water holes, if there's any water left in them and whatnot. So really important, guys and gals, when you get to these spots, try to get there a couple days early. I'll always say this: I'll take 3 days of scouting over an extra day of hunting any day of the week. So it's better to get there a little bit early, have everything ready to go, and be ready to rock on opening morning. When I get to these areas, there's several ways I like to do things. If I'm archery hunting, of course, I'm going to go out there. There's also the spot and stalk method, which, if you don't know, is basically being in a nice high vantage point, looking over a vast terrain, picking out your animals and stalking into a position to whether you can either stalk them in their bed or maybe set yourself up into a position where you can ambush them, either coming from food or water or different sources. Kind of what you see in some of these pictures here is like a blind, which could be used at either a pinch point or some sort of water hole, even at some places where they're coming into feeding grounds and whatnot, which can be very valuable during archery season. I love to hunt wallows, which are a place where bull elk like to roll around in water and drink water in the hot season and also during the rut. And again, I love to hunt water holes when I'm hunting archery. You may hear that some people like to use calls for scouting or hunting elk. I'm not a big call guy, but I will chase elk like crazy if they are calling. I'll use those calls to pinpoint where that elk is at, and then I will run like a madman to where they're at and try to cut them off or try to get on them. Elk tend to be very vocal creatures. I'll let them do all the talking, and I'll just roll in silent and deadly on them. When I'm hunting rifle tactics are a little bit different. Those tend to be a little later in the season. So I like to do a lot of spot and stalk where you again let my glass do the walking. I'll glass from sometimes miles away. I'll find these herds of elk or these bachelor groups of bulls. At that point, once I found them, I usually let them bed down somewhere where I can get to them. And then I will plan my stalk based upon winds. I'll let Don, he's really good at talking thermals. I'll let him kind of explain what thermals are, but always using the wind at my advantage. I like to have the wind blowing into my face at all times because nothing will blow elk out faster than them winding you. With that, I'm gonna let Don talk about this. He does a great job on the thermals and what those are all about as well.
Kind of rolls
So
into our next slide, guys, about
go ahead.
making for a successful elk hunter. So it's been said that 5% of the elk hunters kill 95% of the elk, and I think you guys are hitting spot on wind, wind, wind. So talk to us a little bit about the importance of wind direction and thermals specifically.
Okay, to that point, Paul, I'll lead off this go around. So I think when we talk about advanced techniques, what we're really talking about is the appropriate application of foundational technique. And it's an understanding about there's a couple of things going on here. One is, what is air doing during the day? How is air moving up and down the mountain? You have to have this fundamental understanding that wind is falling downhill in the morning, and there's going to be a time, depending on environmental conditions, where that wind changes and it's going to come back uphill. And if you're trying to sneak on a bull with a bow or a rifle, it's irrelevant. Paul nailed it. You can get away with a lot of movement on an elk, but if they get a nose full of it's game over. So you've got to have this understanding that at some point in the morning, in that dangerous area where you're leaving prime time and you're getting into this kind of secondary bed area where these elk are going to bed down and then move from their initial bed to their primary bed, you have to understand that air is going to change directions, and it's going to flow uphill through the most of the day. And then when elk start to get up and start feeding, you need to understand that you are going to encounter a time where airflow is going to change 180 degrees. So your plan in your head, you need to be thinking about thermals, is we need to get in a crosswind situation to set up to be successful, whether it's 300 yards with a rifle or whether it's 30 yards with a bow. You have to understand these changes that happen with thermals at these key times of the day that the elk key in on. And trust me, they live in that environment all the time. They are using the wind to protect themselves. That's why they'll go up to the top of the ridge with wind in their face and bed looking the wrong way all the time. You have to understand that these things are going to happen, and if you do that, then your success rate's going to go way up. Go ahead.
Outstanding. So I think you guys have touched on some of the things not to do, specifically about the wind direction, but how do we go from, I mean, the picture on the right is like the worst case scenario. You hear those elk and they're on high alert, and next thing you know, they're blown out of the country. So what are some common mistakes that you've seen elk hunters make?
I think a lot of elk hunters, especially in today's day and age, they're watching YouTube videos. They're seeing all these new fandangled elk calls. They go in there and they just start trumpeting, elk bugles and bad cow calls and mews and everything else. These elk, Don could have said it better. They know this country. They know every bugle. They know every cow call. They know every noise that goes on there. And when they start hearing all this rampant music of who knows what, of all different types of calls and stuff, these elk know what's going on. Usually shuts them down and they'll take off. It's kind of in the way that picture's shown there. But again, The only time I've seen elk take off like that is normally if they see you or if they smell you. So I always say use your, especially if you're climbing over hillsides, use those to your advantage. Never skyline yourself. If you're getting ready to glass a new hillside, you're just walking up to it. Take your time, expose the least amount of your body as possible. Glass as you're moving up. Take a look from close to far first. Make sure you see what's right in front of you. You don't want to pass something up that's right close that could be there, not that you don't notice, before you expose yourself and skyline yourself on a hillside. And again, always play the wind, always play those thermals, and it'll keep you safe and keep you away from these bad situations there.
That's right. How about you, Don?
I mean, Paul nailed it. Skylining is probably the biggest problem with newbies that are, trying to dip their toe into the elk game or even into the advanced mule deer game. You got to stay off that skyline. You have to proceed with this idea that the animal you want is right over the ridge. And I can guarantee you, Paul nailed it. I can't even tell you how many times as a guide, I'm glassing over the top of the animal because they're right in front of me. Start close, then work out. I'm telling you that there's no wiser advice than what Paul just said. And common mistakes, have the skill set to deal with the animal once you kill it. Okay. That is the other part of the equation is you got to have that skill set. And that segues right into our next slide.
Absolutely. So, as a game warden, sometimes I run across people that kill an animal and your thought, how do we get this animal out of this hole or off this mountain? Talk to us about after the shot meat care and some things that you can do to not only take care of your meat, but also pack it out safely and cool it down.
Hey, John, you want to lead with that since you were on a roll right there?
All right. So I'm going to tell you right now. One is have a good working knowledge of the gutless method, even if you haven't done it. Watch the tutorials, understand the theory, and embrace the theory. And when you are confronted with the challenge, I can assure you, if you truly embrace the theory, you can execute. And I'm telling you, there is a pile of information out there on YouTube to do this. The rib roll, that's a necessary skill in some states. Check your regs if you draw a tag in that state in terms of rib meat salvage. So very, very important. But quality game bags and there's a couple of situations where if you get an animal down, especially early season archery, do your best to get that thing processed as soon as possible and get it in the bag. And you got to create airflow around that meat and put it on a pile of brush, create space. If you're hunting a Roosevelt elk and it's pouring rain, same thing, brush pile, game bags, more brush, put a tarp over it, create airflow. You got to get that crust on the meat. The other trick, and this is, you can't necessarily do this in the field, but I can tell you, a 50-50 water vinegar, spray that meat down, pull the game bag off. Even if it's got a crust on it, you got to peel it off. Spray it down with that 50-50 water vinegar. Kills surface bacteria. It basically extends the lifespan of the meat, and then you can rebag it. Or if you have the luxury of other game bags, get the bloody game bags off, get it dry, new game bag, keep it bloused, keep that airflow, and get it down to temperature as soon as possible, because we're leading right into this slide. Is what you're trying to do is get the temperature of the meat down as soon as you can, and avoid those dynamic temperature changes you know, morning to midday to night. Even if you got a couple of days where you've got to hustle this meat off the mountain, you can get it done, and your meat salvage is going to be fine. You might have a little bit of bone sour, and if you are going to have a bit of bone sour, I'm going to tell you right now from personal experience, it's usually going to be in the front quarter. Big surprise, not the hind quarter. It's going to be in the front quarter between the shoulder blades and against the spine, because it's one of the thickest parts of the animal, and you can't just cut right into it. But for what we're talking about, especially if you're going to hunt backpack or remote, gutless method, get it apart, get it off the animal, get it cool, and do your best. And understand your responsibilities to comply with the law.
So yeah, there's so many wives' tales about how much meat you're going to be getting off of an animal, and we can debate this University of Wyoming study a little bit. But I guess to Paul's earlier comment, I guess your rule of thumb, Paul, is you're going to be taking 4 loads out, and each of those loads is going to be about 70 pounds. And that's not including, like you were saying, the cape, the hide, and your gear. So we've kind of compared, just our family has compared some of this, especially with boneless for cows. And you could see this figure, 164 pounds. We've actually come home and weighed that, our boneless meat out, and it's right in that ballpark. So our point here is that elk weigh a lot. And I don't know if you've ever been in the elk woods with even a 50-pound pack. Sometimes that's absolutely daunting. And especially when you're talking about severe elevation gain and loss. So I guess transporting meat shouldn't be an afterthought. Have you guys ever kind of tapped out and called in a packer with horses, or maybe even called a buddy that has horses to pack out elk meat?
I could attest that I have. I'm not gonna,
Yeah.
and I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. We were in the Bitterroot Mountains of Idaho, and I just happened to know a couple of folks that had some horses out there. And after it was during archery season, we killed 2 really nice bulls, and I called in for the cavalry, man, because it was just too much for us to take out, and there was too much deadfall for us to safely get that out. There was actually kind of a pain for the horses too, because deadfall is very hard to get over. Just
Mhm.
one thing I kind of want to reiterate, guys, and I know it's probably hasn't been brought up enough. Elk meat is some of the most incredible table fare that you can get. My family and I, we probably eat 3 to 4 elk per year. I have 4 kids. I can't tell you how much I enjoy it and how much I eat it throughout the year. So one of my main concerns is making sure that I'm able to get as much of that meat home in a salvageable, if I could talk here, form, so we can cook it up and enjoy it as the family. And like I said, that's what we eat. My entire family. That's when we make steaks, it's going to be elk steaks. They just know what it is. So that's the most important part of it, is getting this home safely. I can't reiterate it enough. Don can't reiterate it enough. If you have not been out there hunting elk before, I always suggest to go with someone who has. Do your research to know what you're doing, to know what it looks like when you see an animal with. And I'm sure Don and Eric, the first time they ever walked up to an elk, you look at it the first time and you're like, how am I going to, and what am I going to do to get this thing butchered up and taken care of? It is quite an amazing feat when you first walk up to that animal. So know what you're getting yourself into on that.
Absolutely. And I know it's getting to be dinner time, but man, I don't think there's anything better than a good quality elk steak. And I just want you all to get fired up about this. So if you haven't been applying for elk hunting, I would say apply, research. And then something these guys brought up to me is about the importance of taking pictures. Talk to us about the importance of taking pictures. I think you mentioned this earlier, Paul. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So I'm a little bit of a freak when it comes to pictures. My family hates me when we're taking those photos, and my friends are always like, "Oh, Paul's going to take the photos. It's going to take forever." These are your lasting memories. These are your grip and grins, your happy photos. You should be so excited to take a beautiful, clean, respectful photo of that animal take the time to wipe any blood off there. Take the time to push the tongue back in the mouth or cut the tongue out, whatever you want to do with it. Make sure it looks nice. Make sure it's respectable. These are the things you're going to be sharing with your family and with everyone else there. So take these photos, make hunters look respectful in a good light. I can't reiterate that enough. If these photos are going to be out there on your internet, on your Instagram page, on your Facebook page, we always want to be looked at in a good light. We know that conservation is the key here, so we always want to do this in a respectful manner. And I'm telling you, you'll be so happy when these photos come out, because this is what you're going to be sharing with everybody, your family and friends, and they last a lifetime. So take good quality photos and your pictures before you do anything else. It's going to mean the world to you.
Absolutely. So there's a bunch of good questions that have come in on the chat and then also in the Q&A. We don't have a lot of time to go over those live tonight, but I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to look those over and I'll respond to them. If I don't know the answer, I'm going to reach out to some of my buddies, including Paul and Don, and we'll try to get your questions answered. But we wanted to share this resources page with you, and included in the resources page are several videos that talk about not only the gutless method, but the rib roll. Don actually put this rib roll video together for us. And we also wanted to give a shout out to conservation organizations, including the Muley Fanatic Foundation, Mule Deer Foundation, and what's already been brought up, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, California Deer Association, and of course, can't leave out the California chapter of the Wild Sheep Foundation. Paul, thanks so much for serving us. Thanks for serving in your community as a police officer, and as a hunter ed instructor. Don, thank you so much for being willing to come on and mentor new hunters. You're well-spoken, and if I have a Thule elk tag ever, I'm going to call you up, man. Thank you so much. With that, we'll sign off.